Welcome to a true spiritual adventure story like the world has never known. Volume 2, Rise of the First World Teacher, with your host, Dr. James Yogadhi Weldon. Welcome. This is Dr. James Weldon Yogadhi speaking to you from Heavenly Mountain, our community and organization here in Boone, North Carolina. Episode in Volume 2, Autobiography of Yogadhi, The Rise of the First World Teacher. And it shares the milestones, internal milestones, experiences, some of them that I passed through. And also in this segment, we're going to be talking about how the Great Retreat Center has come up in this area and adventures along the way. And in the last episode, 25, I talked about how out of the blue, I'd heard on an advanced class, a silence meditation course, that I was taking, that the Art of Living Foundation had acquired this facility on the Heavenly Mountain. And a friend of mine, his name is David Kaplan, began this process in the mid-1990s, built this huge facility. So now it was the end of 2011, 2012. And on this advanced class that I had just gone, I just heard that the Art of Living had acquired this facility. And I was absolutely flabbergasted that this could happen. I was actually knew the Kaplan brothers. They were in the small community called the 108 with the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, an earlier teacher of mine and of Sri Sri. And in the mid-90s, their company had been bought out, and they took a large portion of that fortune. I don't know how big it was, but could easily be hundreds of millions of dollars, and bought a huge swath of land. And beginning in the 90s, built 3 major campuses up here. One on the west side that the Art of Living had just acquired, just in October 2011. This was a very difficult time in the economy. Huge numbers of foreclosures that were going on all throughout the United States. Property values had just dropped, and David apparently was in a very difficult situation, needed desperately to sell it. It was coming up for auction, very bad time to sell. And so when that auction was held, Sri Sri had visited this campus, now the Retreat Center of the Art of Living, and mentioned that this was all designed for our use. It was designed with the classical, what's called Sthapatya Veda design, the mathematics on the buildings and all of the technology they used to make the space harmonious. And it was also, by the way, smack dab on top of the Blue Ridge Mountains, which actually is the oldest mountain range in the world, Continental Divide right here. Very, very special place. Very powerful place. And I'd even heard it later down the road that we may have been here in the past. That's a whole nother topic. When the whole economy collapsed, the organization that was here, the men of the TM organization called Prusha, they left the property. The main meditation hall was a skateboard park for the town. Water and mold had crept into many of these, and there were about a dozen also had been abandoned. Many of them were totally trashed, broken into, windows broken, wiring pulled, plumbing pulled. In the purchase of the facility, the Art of Living, so when the auction took place, it turned out that Sri Sri Ravi Shankar had put aside all the donations since the earliest days that Art of Living had been teaching in the United States, every time anyone made a donation. And now we had, at that time, $10 million sitting in a bank account. And so when the property came up for auction, there was really only 2 people that were bidding. There were a few others that bid a little bit. Sri Sri knew about what was going on, but he wasn't here during that bidding. It was a live auction, and some of my friends were here. I didn't even know about it at that time. And so one of these groups was a Christian group that apparently had huge means. And so as the bidding went on, every time Art of Living would bid another $100,000, this group and individual would just immediately outbid us. It went up and up and up. It went beyond the $10 million. And at that point, all my friends that were here as part of that auction didn't know what to do. Should we bid more? Should we not bid more? and they were trying to get Shri on the telephone. He didn't pick up the phone. It rang through, and they were calling and calling, and they were literally sweating bullets. And so they got outbid, completely crushed. And so after it appeared that it was all over, by the way, the telephone service also here is not so good right up at the facility. Maybe they couldn't get through all of the time, but whatever happened, they couldn't get through to him. And so they were driving up on, there's a very famous highway here called the Blue Ridge Parkway. And so they drove up to the Blue Ridge Parkway and they stopped overlooking the mountains. Absolutely beautiful, stunning location. Perfect property, designed for our use, obviously not in the best condition. They pulled off the side of the road and they finally got through to the founder of the Art of Living, Shri, on the phone. And he said, how did the auction go? This is what I was told. And they said, oh, Shri, oh, Guruji, we lost the auction. What are we going to do? Because this was like perfect in every way, this property. Everybody was crushed, totally crushed. Because this organization that had outbid us over our 12.5, 13.5, something like that, which was still absolutely an unbelievable bargain. He says, oh, keep your spirits up. Keep your strong sankalpa that it's going to happen. And he said, don't worry, you're going to get it. And even for less, even for less. And so they said, okay, wondering, we'll see, how is this going to happen? And so the way it worked in the auction is that you had to put a deposit down, and then you had a certain amount of time to perform the cash to buy the property. And as the days passed, the time went by and it came closer and closer and closer to the closing date for this organization to buy it. The individuals, Vincott and others that were involved in those negotiations, got a call from the real estate organization. They say, well, you know, they've been a little slow in making their final payment. They paid their deposit, non-refundable, by the way. If they don't perform, would you be willing to come in and buy the property? And they say yes, but not at that price. But to show good faith, we'll go ahead and send you a good size check, but we'll go ahead and do that. And so the days went by, and the final day went by, and they didn't buy the property. And apparently what happened is the funds somehow didn't get transferred. I don't know if it was a problem in the banking system, that's what I heard. But whatever happened, there was a glitch. There was a big cosmic glitch. And this organization, which by the way, I do know, I've met many of the individuals in that organization, weren't able to perform. And so they came back to the Art of Living. Okay, what price would you be willing to pay for this property? See, Shri had said, you'll get it and you'll even get it for less. So they stopped, you know, they had 10 million, you know, they committed everything they could commit. But really the bidding between the two parties ended about $6 million. There was only us and then that other organization. And so we said, this bidding will end and we will agree to buy it at that price, where there was only two left. That ended up being a little over $6 million, all the structures. So the Art of Living bought this property in this really unbelievable, wonderful way for that amount. I thought about my situation. We just bought a new home in nearby Boulder. I just bought a home. Really wasn't in a position to buy another property. But it turns out that the economy was really down, and I had this job for this big company that looked really good on paper. I've been very successful in doing that. One of the top ones in the country, and they had hundreds and hundreds of individuals doing different work kind of in that area. So I looked good. Now it was time for my auction. So there was about 10 or 12 houses that were coming up for auction. And these were all surrounding the Art of Living facility. These were the houses that were built originally for my friends, the men, to actually live in while the construction process was going on in that property. Amongst those houses, there were 3 of them that were in really good condition. 2 or 3 of them, 3 or 4 of them that were in okay condition. At least they hadn't been completely trashed. And the rest of them were just total disasters. Imagine walking into the living room and there's mold everywhere, upstairs, downstairs. Carpets had been pulled out, wiring had been pulled out. In a lot of cases, doors were gone, windows were gone. I had gone to my friend, a partner of mine in Colorado, and said, well, can you help me out if we have to pay for this property? Because I really didn't have the means to completely buy the house, even if it was, I bought it at a very low amount. And he agreed to do that. And we were sitting on our computer as the auction went on. And on the phone actually was Philip Fraser talking to me on the, the old timers had come in and looked around and decided they wanted to buy some of these houses. And so as the auction continued, the 3 good houses went immediately. And as the bidding went on, I couldn't make myself buy a property. And the reason is that I imagined and knew that some of my friends, dear friends, were also bidding. And I couldn't make myself bid against them. I couldn't do that. All I had to do was click on my mouse, but I couldn't do that. And as the prices, they would get cheaper and cheaper because the properties were in worse shape. They started out with the good ones, the medium ones. And there was one left in the okay category. And the way that the bidding worked is that you could buy any of the rest of the houses without competing against anybody at the last price that was set, the last lowest price. So I realized by this time that I could do that. And I turned to my friend and I said, should I do it? Literally, my hand went out, hit the mouse, and I bought it. I bought a house here. I'd never seen it, sight unseen. I'd never even looked at the one that I bought. I bought this house, very large property, including the porch and everything is about 7,000 square feet, much bigger than I need, lots of bedrooms. Now I had to finance the property, and I didn't really have the means to do so. And as I came out and saw this house that I'm living in, turns out was the original meditation hall for the entire community. This is where my friends, the men, did their sanyama practice. And one of those practices was to do the hopping, the early stages of the flying. This was the house with a huge open downstairs area and about 6 bedrooms upstairs. And it had been sitting unused, empty, cold in the winter for 4 or 5 years, but it wasn't totally trashed. That's how I acquired this property. I considered it a very special place. And so over the next few months till July, Sri Sri was planning a huge celebration here. The full moon event called Guru Purnima. It's the day that we honor the spiritual teacher and the tradition and the power of love and grace. And both of these properties had to be brought up into good condition. The townspeople, the building inspectors and so forth, they estimated maybe a year and a half worth of work. And so they announced the course for that main celebration. And I flew back home and I told my wife that I had bought this house. And I went to my partner after I heard that this whole thing was considered our inheritance. I can't let go of this property. I want to own and keep this property. What should I do? So I had to settle up with him. In addition to buying the property, getting into condition, we had to make an estimate of perhaps what kind of profit there would be if we fixed up and sold this property. I bought it for a very ridiculous amount in the low $100,000 range. So I had to settle up with him, which I did. And so he made the most money he ever did in 5 minutes. And my wife was upset because I was immediately thinking about moving out here. She was settled in Colorado. And so I came out here on my own during that time and did all the renovations here and painted the house myself and cleaned it up and tried to give enough furniture and then so that people could sleep here. And by the time that July came around, even up to the day before at the main retreat center, they hadn't received the occupancy permit to do the program. And so as a backup, they had reserved basketball court down at the university, Appalachian State University, large universities here in this town. So we were on our way. People were flying in here from all over the United States to come to this program, and they were planning to do it at the main facility. They didn't even have the ability to occupy it. But Sri Sri had full confidence that it would happen. They had a little bit of a backup just in case. Just before everybody arrived, they got the occupancy permit. So my house here, I think I had 45 people staying at my property. Now I'm 100 yards from his main kutir. I'm right next door. We hung black curtains in the living room in this huge open space so that the men could sleep on one side, the women could sleep on the other side. A lot of trials and tribulations. Anyway, in terms of my financing for this property, I now had to pay cash for the property. I shouldn't have been approved for the loan. And I applied at a local bank. They asked me about my property in Colorado, which we had just bought weeks before that. And they looked at that property, and it turns out that the loan documents were never recorded for my property in Colorado. And they assumed that I owned that property in Colorado with no loan balance. So actually, now I had this job for Sears that looked good on paper. The day before, I would have lost my property, by the way. I was totally sweating bullets. I had a timeline also I had to perform. A little bit longer. I had to get a loan approved. And so when they saw that property in Colorado that I was living in, which I had a loan on, there was no loan yet recorded. They didn't ask and I didn't say anything. They approved the loan here. So like two days before I would have lost this property, the loan was approved here. I'm telling you, I absolutely was sweating bullets. In spite of everything, in spite of all the experiences, I was going through a major period of trial and tribulation. Because obviously this was my dream, is to live here and be part of this and help to share the growth of this community in the development of this wonderful facility home here on the mountain. And literally I was coming home to Heavenly Mountain. That was my little adventure story. What a time. And so in spite of the fact that I let go of my job in Colorado, there was an opportunity for that company in the commercial division of Sears that had been vacated. I didn't have a new job, but we packed up all of our stuff. My wife wasn't happy about this. She came to the big celebration on Gurupurnama, but she arrived. She didn't have anything to do with getting this property ready. Flew out. A friend of mine drove a small RV, had an accident on the way and so forth out here. And after I arrived here, after we moved, I got a new position for that company, the commercial division of Sears. And my job was to go around and talk to all the universities and the heads of different departments. Traveling around, I was really talking about what was happening in the mountain. So I'd meet with some individuals of the universities and colleges, and then I'd say, you know, there's this great organization, nonprofit, that just moved into Boone, North Carolina. You should hear about them. So I got a chance to know really all the towns and the villages in the surrounding states, all the way down into Virginia, a little bit in South Carolina. I spent the next few years traveling around, meeting everybody, getting to know leaders, some heads of different counties, department heads of the universities. And then at the end of that time, overnight, that job ended. And this is when we began to do our vacation lodge business, which took off like crazy. So not only was I given a home, but I was also given a livelihood. And this is why I'm able to spend my time talking to you and doing this kind of work. And when friends come from all over the world to visit Boone several times a year, when the founders come, all my old friends come and stay at my home here, my vacation lodge. Each week there are different groups and organizations that come here and stay. And almost all of those times we leave, we have another nearby place that we stay. And so in this phase, this is when we begin to think about growing and creating the community on Heavenly Mountain. There already were a few old timers here, a few friends that had homes. They were involved in the TM organization. Several other spiritual groups moved here, organizations, a couple of other nonprofits were involved in the area. But we still have this huge, huge facility. And over the last 4 or 5 years, it's really been amazing. Slowly growing and developing takes a while. And a spa and a clinic and a vegetarian restaurant was created. Thank God I didn't have to run it and operate it. I was able to let go of what I was trying to do in Colorado. If we'd bought that facility, I would still be there trying to run and manage that. So life is amazing. Sometimes there are bigger plans for you than you suspect, and your life is deep and long. And I appreciate you taking the time to listen to my adventure about my personal experiences, my autobiography, in the second book, The Rise of the First World Teacher. And at that same time, of course, over those years, the organization, the nonprofit organization of Art of Living, went totally global. 100,000 more centers around the world. Certainly 100,000 plus teachers all over the world. Many, many different nonprofits doing work in different areas, one specifically for veterans, one specifically for prisons, which I was deeply involved with, one for children, one for disaster relief, the International Association of Human Values. It's like a United Nations of individuals that are trying to do good in this world. And I'm an early founding member of some of those. Found myself living on the mountain here, helping to educate people in terms of the potentials of human consciousness and the stages of human consciousness, and inspire people to realize we really are in a tremendous time of growth in the world and possibilities for living that high consciousness are very high. I calculated at one point that if it was 200 or 300 years ago, the chances were like maybe 1 in 25 million that one was able to come into contact with something like this, take the benefit of it, and really have a chance of living that higher states of consciousness. The possibilities are very, very high for many individuals, possibly 1 in 250 in the world. Certainly there are hundreds and hundreds of millions of people that have heard about the activities, and there are tens of millions of people that have taken the program, maybe 60, 70 million at this point around the world. And we still have a lot of years left, a lot of chance to do good. And this organization is absolutely, totally accepting and eclectic of all the world's faiths and traditions and wisdom, supports those traditions and many of the problems that are going on in the world. This organization is working on solutions. It is offering solutions and has really proven solutions which have been shown to work. So I'm amazed. So thank you all for joining me today. Dreams can come true. And my dream for every person on this world is to live in the heart of love and discover the mysteries of their life. We are a mystery. Who we are, where we came from, what is our destiny in this amazing journey. And we're coming to the end of the second volume about my story of my life and being in contact with the rise of what I consider as the first world teachers, really a global force of good, bringing together our one world family. So thank you for your time. We'll join again next episode. I'm just sharing my story, living an enlightened life and the rise of the great beings in this world. I believe that there are many, many great beings in the world now to take part in this global phenomenon. And I've shared my story of a couple of them, in addition to the amazing things that happened with me in my personal relationship with the founder of the Art of Living, Sri Ravi Shankar. So there's more. We are connected to all of the traditions, and the next work is going to be talking about that. So what's going next? We'll see. Join us again. May the love that we are fill this whole world, and may we reach out to those individuals who are suffering and are going through such difficulties and help inspire them, raise them up, do the work. Thanks for joining us in our YouTube channel, books, podcast episodes on living the enlightened life, and autobiography with your host, Dr. James Yogadhi Weldon.